You ever have one of those moments where you're standing outside a fancy venue, dressed in a suit that still smells like dry cleaning fluid, heart pounding, because today's supposed to be a celebration, only to be told you're not welcome? Yeah, that was me. My name's Lucas, I'm 29, and I paid for my sister's entire $25,000 wedding, every last catered canopy and centerpiece, only to be turned away at the door like some random party crasher. The security guy didn't even make eye contact. He just said, "Sorry, you're not on the list. You've been blacklisted." Blacklisted? At my sister's wedding. The one I paid for. But let me back up, because the real story starts way before that. I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. There's me, then my younger sister, Ava, who just turned 27, and our baby brother, Max, who's 23 and kind of floats through life like he's in a music video. Our parents passed away in a car accident when I was 21. Ava had just started college, and Max was still in high school. I dropped out of school and picked up 2 jobs just to keep the lights on and food on the table. I gave up a lot in those years, not that I'm asking for pity. I did it because I love them, because that's what family is supposed to do. Eventually, things turned around. I taught myself to code in the late night hours between shifts and started freelancing. Then came a software startup with 2 friends, a few lucky breaks, and before I knew it, I was making more money in a month than I used to see in a year. I didn't flaunt it. I bought a modest house, helped Max finish college, paid off Ava's student loans, and just tried to be the kind of big brother our parents would have been proud of. For most of the last decade, Ava and I were close. Or so I thought. She used to call me when she needed help with her taxes or when her car wouldn't start. I walked her down the aisle at her first wedding. Yeah, that didn't work out. And I even helped her move out after the divorce. We laughed, fought, shared Netflix passwords, all of it. But something started to change about 1.5 years ago when she met Daniel. Daniel's the kind of guy who wears a luxury watch to brunch and makes sure you notice it. Real estate agent with a trust fund and the personality of a knockoff motivational speaker. From day one, I didn't trust him. He spoke to waiters like they were dirt, made passive jabs about how lucky Ava was to have family support, and referred to me as the wallet behind my back, which I only found out because Max overheard him at a barbecue. Ava changed around him. Slowly. At first, it was subtle. She stopped texting as often, canceled dinner plans last minute, laughed a little too hard at Daniel's mean jokes. Then it got weirder. She started dodging questions about her relationship, brushing off concerns, and once snapped at me for not respecting her choices when I gently suggested Daniel might not be who he pretends to be. When they got engaged, I congratulated her with a genuine smile, even though my gut felt off. I offered to help with the wedding, not because I wanted to be involved in Daniel's life, but because I loved my sister. She hesitated at first, but eventually said yes. Her voice changed when she did. Not grateful, not excited, just hesitant, like she was saying yes to a business transaction. Nothing too flashy, I told her. Just tell me what you need, and I'll take care of it. A week later, I got a spreadsheet. I'm not joking. A full-on, itemized, color-coded Google sheet labeled Ava and Daniel's wedding budget. Flowers, venue, catering, bar tab, dresses, photography. Everything tallied up to just under $25,000. No note, no thank you, just a link. It stung a little, but I told myself she was just busy. Weddings are stressful, right? I wired the money. Over the next few months, I heard barely anything. No invites to tastings. No updates. No look at the dress, texts. Just the occasional vague group message about where to send RSVPs and who was assigned what hotel. When I asked if she needed help setting up the rehearsal dinner, she replied with a thumbs-up emoji and said, "Already handled." When I asked about my +1, she said it was tight on space. I figured maybe she was just overwhelmed. That was the generous version. The darker part of me wondered if Daniel had gotten in her ear, whispering things, drawing lines, isolating her. But I didn't want to start a fight, so I let it go. A week before the wedding, I got a generic digital invite via email. Not even my full name, just L.J. and the venue address. No itinerary, no schedule, just the bare minimum. I called Max and asked if he got anything different. He said yeah. His invite came in a thick envelope with gold calligraphy and a wax seal. Weird, he said. I thought they all looked like that. Something didn't sit right with me. So I called Ava. "Hey," I said. "We good?" "Yeah, why?" She replied, way too casually. Just haven't heard much. Wanted to check in. I'm still bringing the gift and all, but there's no need for a gift, she cut in quickly. What do you mean? You've done enough. Her tone wasn't warm. It wasn't appreciative. It was clinical, like I'd fulfilled a contractual obligation and now needed to stop talking. I stayed quiet for a beat, then said, okay, well, I'll see you Saturday. Sure, she said. It's gonna be great. Click. The call left me cold. Saturday came. I got dressed in a navy suit, polished shoes, and even booked a black car to drop me off. Figured after dropping 25 grand, I'd at least show up looking the part. I had a handwritten letter for Ava in my jacket pocket, something I wanted to give her in private. Just something that said, I'm proud of you. I know Mom and Dad would be too. When the car pulled up to the venue, a gorgeous converted vineyard just outside the city, I was impressed. The decorations were elegant, string lights flickering in the early evening light, guests mingling near a champagne fountain. A harpist was playing somewhere off to the side. It looked like a movie scene. I stepped out, straightened my tie, and walked toward the entrance. That's when it happened. The security guy, a tall man with an earpiece and clipboard, stepped in front of me. Name: Lucas Jennings. He scanned the list. Then again. Then squinted at the iPad like it was lying to him. Sorry, sir, he said. You're not on the list. I blinked. What? No, that can't be right. I'm the bride's brother. Sir, he said again, more firmly this time. I was instructed that if anyone by your name showed up, you were not to be allowed in. What are you talking about? My voice cracked a little. I paid for this wedding. He gave me a sympathetic look, the kind that makes you want to scream. I'm sorry, he said. I don't know anything else. I just have instructions. I stepped back, heart hammering. Guests were walking by, some giving me awkward glances, others pretending not to see. I felt like I'd been slapped. No, like I'd been shoved out of my own house. I called Ava. No answer. I called again. Voicemail. I stood there in the cooling dusk, fists clenched, breath shaky, wondering what the heck had just happened. That's when Max called me. And when I told him what happened, he paused. Long enough for me to feel it in my gut. Lucas, he said slowly, I think you need to hear something. I stepped away from the main path, into the shadow of a tall hedge, and Max told me what he'd overheard. And what he said made my stomach turn. I felt the letter in my pocket crumpling under my tightened fingers. And that's when the switch flipped in my brain. That's when I stopped being the supportive older brother and started thinking about how to burn the whole day down before she even walked down the aisle. I remember standing there, phone pressed against my ear, listening to Max's voice crackle through the line. At first, it was hard to make out. There was music in the background, laughter, the clinking of glasses. Then his words came through clear, so sharp they could have cut me clean in half. Lucas, I think they planned this. I froze. What do you mean? He took a breath. Daniel's mom was bragging about how classy it was to keep the wedding exclusive. She said Ava made the decision to scale back the guest list to only people who were, and I quote, supportive of the couple's new future. My mouth went dry. She said you were too controlling, that your presence would be a disruption. I turned away from the entrance, walking blindly past the vineyard's stone wall, through a gravel path that crunched beneath my shoes. I didn't want anyone to see my face. Not like this. Max, I said slowly, you're inside right now, right? Yeah. I got here early. I was sitting with a few of Daniel's cousins. But bro, they were talking like they all knew. Like this was decided a while ago. I clenched my jaw. And Ava? She's okay with this. He hesitated. She didn't even flinch when Daniel's aunt called you the donor. The donor. Like I was some anonymous organ bank they used to keep the whole event alive. No name, no face. Just a bank account. I felt something in me start to crack. And then Max said something that took that crack and split it wide open. She saw me talking to you just now, he muttered. I think she knows. She just walked away. No eye contact. Like she's embarrassed. That was it. That was the moment. The moment I knew something had changed forever. This wasn't about a mix-up. It wasn't about limited seating. It wasn't even about Daniel and his smirking, slimy presence infecting everything he touched. It was Ava, my sister. She chose this. She chose to erase me from the biggest moment of her life, after everything I'd done. After raising her, shielding her from the worst years of our lives, giving her everything I could when I had nothing. And she couldn't even send a text to say, I'm sorry, but there was no warning. Just a blacklist. I sat down on a low stone bench behind the hedges, staring at the cracked screen of my phone like it held some kind of answer. I scrolled through our messages, years of birthday texts, inside jokes, little hearts sent after long calls. All of it, now meaningless. I thought about the day I paid off her student loans. I'd kept it a secret for weeks. Then one night, when she called me in tears about her car getting booted for unpaid parking tickets, I told her, "Check your balance." She screamed, laughed, cried, said I was the best brother in the world. That girl, where did she go? Was this Daniel's doing? Or was this just who she became when no one needed to depend on me anymore? I didn't know what hurt more, the betrayal, or the possibility that she never saw me as more than a safety net. Max texted me a few minutes later. "She just asked where you were. I told her you were outside." She shrugged and said, "Well, he wasn't supposed to come." I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't reply. That moment, sitting alone, rejected, humiliated, was my breaking point. Not because I'd been locked out of a party, not even because I'd wasted $25,000, but because my sister, the one I thought I'd sacrificed everything for, didn't care enough to send a single word of explanation, of apology, of anything. She just erased me, like I was inconvenient, disposable. I stayed on that bench until the sky began to dim and the soft yellow glow of the vineyard lights lit up the path. I could hear faint music now, a string quartet playing something gentle, guests laughing, the sounds of wine glasses being raised in toasts. And that's when something inside me snapped into focus. If they thought I was just the donor, if they thought they could use me and toss me aside like an empty gift bag, they had another thing coming. Because what they didn't know, what Ava had clearly forgotten, was that I hadn't just sent money. I controlled the money. The payments were done through my company's corporate account. I had strings tied to every vendor, every contract. The florist, the caterers, the lighting team, the sound crew, they all had terms that required final authorization and sign-off, even after deposit. Especially the venue, which I personally negotiated down by 15% in exchange for handling liability coverage through my business. I hadn't told Ava. She wouldn't have understood the paperwork. She just sent me numbers, and I made it all happen. They thought I was just the wallet? No, I was the architect. And they had built this entire fairy tale wedding on a foundation they didn't even realize was mine. I stood up slowly, brushing dust from my pants, and started walking back toward the gravel lot. I wasn't going to cause a scene. I wasn't going to yell or shout or throw punches. I was going to make one call. Just one. But first, I needed to gather receipts. I dialed my assistant, Jamie. She picked up on the second ring. "Lucas, aren't you at your sister's wedding?" "About that," I said, keeping my voice level. "There's been a development. I need you to send me copies of the vendor contracts for the Mitchell Vineyard event. Full versions, especially catering, sound, and tent lighting. And check the release clauses." Okay. Right now." "Yes, right now." I hung up and called another number. Malcolm, the head of the catering company. We'd done events together before, and I knew his team relied heavily on our ongoing business for referrals. "Hey, Malcolm. It's Lucas Jennings." "Lucas, everything okay? I thought you were at the—" "Listen," I said, cutting him off. "This is delicate. I need to confirm. Has the final authorization gone through for the Burton Mitchell wedding?" "No, not yet. We have the deposit, but we're still pending your final go-ahead." "What?" "Because there's been a situation," I said calmly, "and I'm pulling the approval." There was a pause. "You're pulling?" "You heard me. And I'll make it up to you. I'll cover any incurred costs. But I can't have this event associated with our business anymore." "Wow. Okay. That's unexpected. I'll explain later." One by one, I made the calls. The florist, the lighting company, the string quartet. Each time, I kept my voice calm. Professional. I didn't rant. I didn't explain. I just said there had been a breach in agreement, and I was rescinding approval. By the time I hung up the last call, my heart was thudding in my chest. I wasn't doing this out of pettiness. I was doing this because I realized something essential, something I had forgotten over the years of bending over backwards to keep my family afloat. Being generous does not mean being a doormat. You can give everything you have to someone, but if they don't respect you, they will always find a way to take more. Ava had made a choice. She decided to erase me from her narrative. So I decided to erase the wedding she built on my back. I texted Max. "Hey, just hang tight. Things might get interesting." "Max, what do you mean?" "Me, just watch. I'm not going to ruin her day. Me. I'm going to cancel it. Max didn't reply. I started walking again, this time toward the parking lot. My car was waiting at the curb. I opened the door, sat down, and stared out the window at the glowing vineyard in the distance. I thought about Mom and Dad. I thought about what they'd say if they could see this mess. And then I thought about something else, a memory I hadn't touched in years. It was the week after our parents' funeral. Ava was sobbing in the hallway, begging me not to let the state split us up. Don't let them take Max, she'd cried. Please, Luke. I'd made her a promise that day. I won't let anything happen to us, I told her. I'll keep us together, no matter what. I kept that promise, even when it broke me. And now, she'd chosen to forget. So I was choosing to remember who I really was. Not a donor, not a wallet, not a backup plan. I was the reason this wedding was even happening. And in a few minutes, it wasn't going to happen at all. I didn't drive home right away. After I made the last call and sat in the quiet of the car, staring out at the golden-lit vineyard that was about to become a silent shell of a celebration, I thought I'd feel satisfied. Vindicated, maybe. But the truth? It felt hollow. Not because I regretted what I did. I didn't. They needed to be reminded that money isn't a faceless river of free favors, and love isn't a vending machine where you press buttons for what you want and ignore the machine after. But still, I didn't feel proud. I just felt done. I drove past the freeway exit to my neighborhood and kept going. I didn't even know where I was heading. Somewhere far enough from the wedding, from the city, from the weight of being the guy who always has it together. Eventually, I ended up at the beach. Not some crowded boardwalk with kids and vendors. I mean the old, half-forgotten stretch of sand where we used to go as kids. Mom would pack peanut butter sandwiches and those sad juice boxes with more foil than flavor. I sat down on the sand, letting the ocean wind undo the stiffness in my chest, and just watched the waves crash for what felt like hours. That night, I stayed in a motel off the coast. No laptop, no phone calls, no noise. Just silence. When I finally checked my phone the next morning, it was a mess. Max had called me 6 times. There were texts from numbers I didn't recognize. And then one from Ava. Why would you do that to me? That was all it said. No, hey, no, let's talk. No, what happened? Just a sentence loaded with blame, as if I'd ruined something she hadn't already torn apart. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't have anything to say. I did. But because I didn't trust myself not to burn the last fragile bridge between us. And maybe that bridge needed to burn. Max finally got through to me later that evening. He filled in the blanks. The venue staff started quietly packing up as guests were seated. The champagne table was cleared. The lights dimmed. The band stopped playing mid-song. People thought it was some kind of dramatic reveal, like Ava was about to enter on a white horse or something. Then the officiant left. Then the flowers were removed. And finally, the event manager stepped forward, cleared her throat, and said, "We apologize, but due to unforeseen circumstances, the event will not proceed." Max said. Daniel freaked out. Ava looked like she was trying not to cry. And their families, those smug, backhand comment-making relatives, were left blinking under a string of lights that no longer had power. No one knew what happened. They just knew something big had gone wrong. And I wasn't there to take the fall for it. After Max told me everything, I felt something strange. Not victory, I still didn't feel that. But something quieter, calmer. Like I'd finally let go of a weight I'd carried for too long. The weight of trying to be the glue, the hero, the older brother who could fix everything with enough effort. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to fix anything. I was just letting it fall apart. And weirdly, it felt like a kind of freedom. Over the next few weeks, I went quiet. I took a break from my company, told Jamie to handle all client comms, and forwarded my emails to an archive folder. I needed time to think, not just about what happened, but about why it hurt so badly, and what it said about who I'd become. When you grow up having to be the responsible one, it messes with your sense of identity. You start to measure your worth by how much you give, how much you endure, how many fires you can put out before collapsing. I realized I had built my entire adult life around being needed, by Ava, by Max, by my team, by everyone. And when Ava finally stopped needing me, she discarded me, like a scaffold after the building is complete. It was a brutal realization, but it gave me something I didn't expect: clarity. I started journaling. Not the cringe kind with Dear Diary and scented pages. Just a plain, ugly notebook where I wrote what I actually felt. Anger, loss, resentment, but also relief. Relief that I wasn't stuck in that dynamic anymore. Relief that I could finally ask, what do I want? Turns out, I didn't even know. So I tried to find out. I signed up for a pottery class. Random, I know. But something about molding clay with my hands, something messy, slow, and imperfect, felt healing. I spent weekends at local farmers markets, not because I needed to buy anything, but because I liked talking to people who weren't trying to get something from me. Just old couples selling jams, college kids making candles, people who smiled with their eyes and didn't care who I was. I reconnected with a friend I hadn't seen in years, Nadia. She'd been one of the only people who showed up at my dad's funeral, even though we hadn't spoken since high school. She heard about it through someone else and came anyway, just sat beside me in silence while I stared at the casket. We met for coffee, then lunch, then long walks where we didn't check our phones once. She never asked about the wedding. She just said, "You look lighter," and left it at that. It wasn't romantic. Not at first. Just real. Grounding. And as the weeks stretched into months, I started rebuilding my relationship with Max too. We began grabbing drinks every Friday. No agenda, no family gossip, just beers and sarcasm and the kind of inside jokes that make you forget how heavy life can be. Max confessed he'd been feeling stuck for a while, unsure of his career, his purpose. I told him I'd help him figure it out, but only if he wanted it. No pressure. I want it, he said, but only if it's you helping. Not the version of you that solves everything. Just you. That hit me harder than I expected. So I let myself just be me. Not the fixer. Not the donor. Just Lucas. I slowly returned to work, but differently this time. I delegated more. I built boundaries. I stopped answering emails after 6 p.m. I even started working on a side project, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. An app for caregivers and siblings who fall into the parentified child trap. A way for people like me to share their stories, find resources, and not feel so alone. I called it Unburden, because that's what I'd always wanted for myself, and what I now wanted to give others. The funny thing is, once I stopped trying to prove my worth by giving everything away, more things started coming to me. Clients I admired reached out. A small podcast asked to interview me about entrepreneurship and mental health. I was invited to speak at a local college, not about coding or startups, but about resilience. Apparently, people noticed the shift. Apparently, I wasn't the only one who'd felt broken by being too useful. Meanwhile, Ava stayed silent. For months. No apology. No explanation. She didn't reach out on my birthday. Didn't return the letter I mailed her. A letter that wasn't bitter, just honest. A letter that said, "I loved you. I always did. But I can't keep loving someone who treats me like a transaction." I never heard back. And yet, for the first time, I was okay with that. Because I was learning that closure isn't something someone gives you. It's something you build yourself, brick by brick, moment by moment, until you can stand inside it and breathe. Still, there was one last piece I hadn't touched. The part of me that wanted Ava to understand. That still pictured us, gray-haired, old, laughing about this someday. The part that hadn't quite let go. And then, about 8 months after the wedding that wasn't, I got a call. From a blocked number. I let it ring. Then ring again. And on the third ring, I picked up. A familiar voice filled the line. A voice I hadn't heard in what felt like a lifetime. Lucas. It was Ava. She sounded different. Raw. Fragile. Like someone had peeled off the mask and left nothing but the real, messy person underneath. I don't know where to start, she said. I stayed silent. I messed up, she whispered. I messed up so bad. Her voice broke. And then she said something I never thought I'd hear. Can I tell you what really happened? I looked out the window of my home office, at the spring leaves dancing in the wind. And I said, "Go ahead." I didn't speak for a few seconds after Ava said those words. Can I tell you what really happened? Because part of me wasn't ready to hear it. For months, I'd built a new version of myself. Calmer, clearer, less bound by the expectations that had once weighed me down. I wasn't angry anymore, not like I had been. Not that searing, restless kind of rage that fueled the phone calls I made the night of the wedding. But underneath all of that progress, there was still a bruise, still a sting. And now, here was Ava, on the other end of the line, sounding like a ghost of herself, like someone who'd finally realized the damage she'd done, or maybe just the consequences of it. "Are you there?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm here," I said quietly. "Talk." She exhaled. It sounded shaky, like she'd been holding her breath for months. I don't know how to explain this without sounding like a complete idiot, she began. But I wasn't the one who blacklisted you. I didn't even know. I blinked. What do you mean you didn't know? Max said you told him I wasn't supposed to come. She went quiet for a second. I said that because I panicked. Because Daniel told me you chose not to come. That you'd said you were too busy. That you wanted out. My blood went cold. That doesn't make any sense, I said. You spoke to me days before the wedding. I know. I was confused. But I didn't question it. I should have. But I didn't want another fight. You have no idea how much pressure I was under. I clenched my jaw. You had every opportunity to call me and ask. I know. Every chance to double-check. To say, hey, this feels off. I know. The silence stretched again. On her end, I could hear a train horn in the distance. She must have been near her apartment downtown. I let him isolate me, she said finally. I let him decide who was in and who was out. And I told myself it was easier that way. That if I just stayed quiet and kept smiling, things would settle. She paused. But they didn't. I stayed quiet. She continued. The day of the wedding, when everything started falling apart, I thought it was karma. Like the universe was finally screaming in my face. I didn't even try to fix it. I just froze. And when people asked what happened, I panicked and told them you never showed. And after? I asked, why didn't you call me after? Because I was ashamed. The words sat heavy between us. Daniel left 3 weeks after the wedding, she said. Turns out, once the party was over and the photos were staged, he didn't really want to be married. He just wanted the image. I rubbed my forehead. So you were never really in control. I thought I was, she said. But I wasn't. Not of the guest list, not of the money, not of myself. Another pause. Then, I was angry for a while. I blamed you. I blamed everyone. But the truth is, I let it happen. I let him talk about you like you were an ATM. I didn't defend you. I didn't protect you. And worst of all, I believed things I knew weren't true just because it was easier than confronting him. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry, Lucas. For the first time in nearly a year, I closed my eyes and let myself feel everything I'd been burying. The confusion, the betrayal, the grief of losing a version of my sister I thought I'd always have. And oddly enough, it didn't consume me. It passed through me, like a wave that finally hit shore. Thank you for saying that, I said softly. I wish it had come sooner. Me too. We talked for almost an hour. She didn't try to justify what happened. She didn't ask for anything. She just sat in it, admitted it, owned it. And that was more than I ever expected. But what she said next, that changed everything. There's something else, she said. Something I didn't tell you before. About the money. I frowned. What about it? You remember that spreadsheet I sent you? The wedding budget. Of course. Daniel patted it. My stomach dropped. What? He added items to inflate the total. Things we didn't actually need. Things that were never even ordered. Like that custom backdrop from Italy. Fake. That ice sculpture of the two of us. Never existed. He just made stuff up. I felt my pulse quicken. And the worst part, she continued, was that he had the gall to brag about it to his friends. Said you were too rich to notice. That you were so desperate to play the hero, you'd never question it. I was stunned. How much did he take? I don't know. Maybe 6, 7 grand. More? He used a shell account and rerouted part of the deposit after you wired it. I went completely still. This wasn't just betrayal. This was fraud. He stole from me, through her. And now, months later, he was off living his next lie while I was left with the wreckage. Ava was crying now. Quiet tears. I should have seen it, she whispered. I should have stopped it. But I wasn't listening anymore. My mind was racing. Not with rage. With calculation. This was different now. This wasn't just personal. This was financial. Documented. Traceable. And unlike before, I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was clear. And when I'm clear, I'm dangerous. Over the next few days, I got to work. The first thing I did was revisit all the contracts I'd filed for the wedding. I had every invoice, every email chain, every payment receipt. Jamie had organized it all neatly in our event folder, which, at the time, I'd created purely for tax purposes. Now it was evidence. I called my company's accountant, Andrea. Hey, I said, I need your help with something outside of work. I gave her a quick summary. Not the emotional stuff, just the facts. She was quiet for a beat, then said, you have receipts? Everything. Then he's toast. With her help, We cross-referenced the actual service charges with the ones listed in Ava's spreadsheet. Sure enough, there were discrepancies. The Italian marble centerpiece rental? Total fabrication. The private post-wedding yacht cruise? Non-existent. In fact, most of the charges that had bumped the wedding from $17,000 to $25,000 were complete fiction. I tracked the wire transfers. I traced the routing numbers. And buried deep in one of the early deposit invoices was an alternate payment destination, a dummy LLC under Daniel's name that led to a checking account in Miami. The idiot didn't even try to hide it. With that in hand, I reached out to an old friend, Leo. He was a corporate lawyer who owed me a favor. We'd worked together on a joint venture 2 years back, and I'd pulled him out of a massive deadline mess by stepping in last minute. I told him everything. He asked one question. You want to sue him or bury him? I didn't hesitate. Both. Leo smiled through the phone. Let's play chess. We started building a case, quietly. Fraud, misrepresentation, breach of agreement. Because the money had gone through my corporate account, it gave us stronger legal grounds. And since the dummy LLC used my name to secure false deposits, we had a potential criminal angle too. But I didn't stop there. Remember that app I'd been building? Unburden? The one for people like me, the quietly responsible ones, the siblings who become parents, the caretakers who never ask for anything? Well, it was nearing beta launch. And I had an idea. I wasn't going to just take Daniel to court. I was going to turn the entire experience into something useful. I called Nadia one night, told her what I was thinking. I want to do a full podcast series, I said, about invisible burdens, the emotional cost of always being the strong one. I want to talk about my story, what happened with Ava, the wedding, everything, but anonymized, not to call anyone out, just to help people feel seen. She didn't even pause. I'll help you produce it. So while Leo built the case in the background, Nadia and I started planning the show. We called it the Donor Complex, a nod to what Ava's in-laws had labeled me that day. Each episode would unpack a different layer of what it means to be the dependable one, the unthanked one, the backbone no one notices until it breaks. We recorded the first episode in a rented studio that smelled like dust and ambition. And when I told my story, when I laid it out, piece by piece, I didn't feel shame. I felt power, control, clarity, because now I wasn't just reacting to betrayal. I was using it, turning it into something real. And the best part? Daniel had no idea what was coming. Because revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a slow, quiet setup. A signature here, a recording there, a story told to the right audience, a lawsuit that arrives like a dagger in silk wrapping. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destruction. It's about rebuilding. Better, stronger, with receipts. The thing they never tell you about revenge is that it doesn't happen in one big cinematic explosion. It's quieter, slower, piece by piece, like tightening a series of bolts until something finally snaps in the exact spot you intended. And by the time your target realizes what's happening, the game's already over. And that was exactly how it went down with Daniel. For months, Leo and I built the case in silence. Deliberate, methodical silence. We pulled bank records. We subpoenaed vendor statements. We gathered digital copies of the padded invoices, the dummy LLC filings, and every last scrap of paperwork tied to that wedding. And we did it all without telling Ava, not because we wanted to hurt her, but because she needed to stay clean. I wasn't dragging her into this unless I had no choice. In the meantime, the Donor Complex podcast launched, and it blew up faster than either Nadia or I expected. We weren't doing it for money. Each episode was just me talking honestly about what it feels like to be the reliable one, the fixer, the person people rely on until the moment you need support yourself. It was raw and unpolished. And that's exactly why people resonated with it. Messages flooded in. People telling me they finally felt understood. People crying as they listened. People saying they'd lived their whole lives in the shadow of someone else's expectations. We kept names anonymous, of course. I never once mentioned Daniel or Ava or the wedding by detail. But those who knew, knew. About 3 weeks after episode 3 dropped, Ava called again. I listened, she said softly. To all of it. Yeah. I didn't know it felt like that. I didn't know you were carrying so much. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She took a breath. I talked to a therapist. That surprised me, in a good way. And I'm trying. I'm trying to understand why I let myself be manipulated. Why I shut you out. Why I didn't fight for you. That's good, I said quietly. I want to fix things between us, she said. I know it'll take time, but I want my brother back. For the first time, those words didn't hit the old bruise. They hit something gentler. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. But things will be different now. I know. We talked more over the next few weeks. Slowly, carefully, honestly. No pretending everything was fine, no sweeping things under the rug. If we were rebuilding, it was from the foundation up, not the old, cracked one. But while that relationship mended, Daniel's life unraveled. And I didn't even have to lift a finger. The first blow came when Leo filed the civil suit. We served him at his real estate office. The moment he saw my name on the paperwork, he apparently stuttered so hard he couldn't finish speaking to his client. The suit outlined everything: fraud, misappropriation of funds, unlawful enrichment, falsified invoices, trademark misuse of my company name in the dummy LLC, and even tax violations thanks to the shady rerouting of deposits. The total damages? $38,600 plus penalties. And that was just civil. Daniel tried to deny it, of course. He claimed it was all a misunderstanding. Said I'd misread the transfers. His lawyer tried to intimidate us with letters that sounded like someone Googled legal threats. But the documents didn't lie. And when the bank records came back proving the dummy LLC was tied to his personal social security number, it was checkmate. Then the criminal charges landed. I didn't push for jail, though Leo said we easily could have pursued it. Instead, we pushed for something more practical: restitution. Full payback, plus fees, plus interest, plus a court order preventing him from opening any financial account under a business name for 5 years. The man worked in real estate. That restriction alone was a career-ending blow. Next, the podcast audience found him, not because I named him, but because he couldn't keep his mouth shut. Someone recognized details. Someone else connected dots. A few listeners who knew him personally confirmed pieces of the story. Suddenly, his social media pages were full of people asking why he stole wedding money, why he isolated a young woman from her family, why he set up a fake LLC. He responded poorly, very poorly. One screenshot from his Instagram story had him saying, "People need to mind their business. Some people are obsessed with making drama." It didn't help. If anything, it poured gasoline on the fire. A client of his who heard the rumors pulled their listing agreement. Then another. Then a third. By the time we reached the settlement hearing 4 months later, he had lost most of his commissions, and his reputation was dragging behind him like a shredded banner. He showed up to court looking like someone who hadn't slept in days. His lawyer whispered urgently in his ear, but Daniel just stared at me. Not with anger, with fear. The judge reviewed the documents, the transfers, the timeline, the false invoices, and ruled in our favor within 15 minutes. Daniel was ordered to pay full restitution and structured payments within 36 months, with wage garnishment if he missed a single one. After the ruling, he approached me in the hallway. His voice was hoarse. "You really couldn't just let it go?" "Let it go," I repeated. "You stole from me. You used my sister. You threw her family away so you could control her. And then you lied about it when you got caught." He swallowed. "You ruined my life." "No," I said calmly. "You did." He opened his mouth again, but his lawyer pulled him aside. And that was the last time I ever saw him. Ava didn't try to defend him. In fact, she apologized again, not for him, but for herself, for letting it all happen under her nose. She admitted she'd fallen for someone who wore confidence like cologne, but didn't have any real substance underneath. "I kept choosing the version of him I wanted," she said quietly, "not the one who actually existed." Recovery wasn't quick or easy for either of us. But slowly, we rebuilt our relationship. Not the old dynamic where I carried everything, but a new one where we were equals. Ava got a part-time job at a nonprofit. She started therapy regularly. She spent weekends with Max and me, just watching movies or cooking dinner. We talked about the wedding only once more, months after the court case closed. "I know it'll always be a scar," she said, "but I hope it won't always feel like a wound." "It won't," I told her. "Scars mean healing." And she nodded, kneeling on the couch to hug me tightly. As for me, the Donor Complex podcast went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. It landed me speaking engagements, interviews, panel invites. But more importantly, it connected me with thousands of people who'd lived through what I did. The guilt, the burden, the silent exhaustion. Unburden, the app, launched 4 months later, and gained traction faster than any project I'd ever done. It became my passion, my mission. For the first time, I wasn't building to be needed. I was building to be understood. And then, something happened that surprised even me. Ava, one night after dinner, said, "I listened to your latest episode. The one about forgiveness. Yeah, you said forgiveness isn't the same as letting someone back into your life. Right. But you also said forgiving yourself is harder than forgiving someone else." Yeah. She looked up at me. "I'm trying to forgive myself for what I let happen." I put a hand on her shoulder. "I know. And can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you forgive me?" I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't know my answer. I did. But because I wanted to be sure she'd truly hear it. Finally, I nodded. "I do." She cried. Not loud, heaving sobs. Just quiet tears that she didn't wipe away, like she was letting them fall for the first time without shame. And in that moment, I realized something. Revenge had already done its job. It didn't give me back what I lost. It gave me back me. Months later, as I stood on a small stage at a community event, sharing pieces of my story with an audience of strangers who understood far more than they revealed, I realized something else. Revenge wasn't the ending. It was the turning point. The ending was peace. And when the event wrapped, when the applause faded, when I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I felt it fully for the first time. Not anger, not resentment, not triumph, just weightlessness. I walked to my car, pulled out my phone, and sent a message to our family group chat. Yes, it had been revived. "Dinner this weekend? I'll cook." Ava replied with a smile emoji. Max replied with, "Only if it's your garlic chicken." I smiled, slipping the phone back into my pocket. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt whole. Because in the end, revenge wasn't about tearing someone else down. It was about finally standing on solid ground myself. And the final line that settled in my mind, the one that felt right, the one that summed up everything, was simple. Sometimes you don't rise when people lift you up. Sometimes you rise when they finally let you fall.